Thank you all for coming. I know many festivals are on today, and um, well, this is a kind of break and all that. Vikram Sarabhai died at the age of 52 in 1971. And half a century after his death, we are benefiting from his many initiatives. These days, with the space program being much in the news, we hear a lot about his role as the father of the Indian space program, as we should. But in my talk today, I want to also draw attention to the other institutions briefly, but to try and give you a kind of sort of better rounded, well rounded picture of the multifaceted individual who was also a builder of many institutions, apart from being, of course, the father of the Indian space program. So, some of these institutions that he built are the Physical Research Laboratory, the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, the Darpana Academy for Performing Arts, and the National Institute of Design, um, which is, I mean, his siblings are more conventionally associated with it, but Vikram Sarabhai also played a role in its founding. And there are many others, like the Community Science Center in Ahmedabad, the Ahmedabad Management Association. Here's just a list, just to kind of give you a sense of the range of his initiatives and his interests. Vikram Sarabhai also headed successful manufacturing companies because he belonged to an industrial family. Some of these were Sarabhai Glass, Sarabhai Chemicals in Baroda, and Swastik Oil Mills. He was also, of course, sorry, so here is, this is Sarabhai Chemicals. He was also chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, of course. He was honored with the Padma Bhushan in 1966 and the Padma Vibhushan posthumously in 1972. And there is a crater on the moon named after him. I mean, there is something almost unreal to the scale and variety of his accomplishments. It seems incredible that any one person could have done so much. And I almost felt like I had to take him apart like one would a clock or a very kind of fancy gizmo to understand how it worked. And this is what I tried to do in my biography, Vikram Sarabhai: A Life, which some of you may have read. Janvi Falke, I'm very grateful to her for agreeing to be in conversation, and we will be talking more after this talk. But before we get into a conversation, I thought I would try and communicate something of the essence of his personality. Who was Vikram Sarabhai? Um, it's hard to kind of go over his whole life in half an hour, and so I'm not going to kind of try and do that. But so I was trying to kind of figure out how should I enter and enter into this sort of life and mind of this visionary. And I'm often these days reminded of the fact that Vikram Sarabhai was a very inspiring personality and a role model, particularly for young people. And so I decided to pick as my entry point, somewhat unconventionally perhaps, two moments from Vikram Sarabhai's childhood and try and kind of do this talk based on them. So here is the first. It's a photograph from when he was about 11 years old. You see, of course, Vikram Sarabhai, the young boy, sitting on the train, which he has actually built with the help of these two other gentlemen. And if you look at him, he's sort of dressed almost like an adult. And the way he's posing, there's a certain self awareness and maturity for a child. And even though he is with older men, he seems to be fairly confident. So, where did it come from? This kind of maturity and sort of confidence and self sort of possessed air. So, let us look into his background a little bit. He was born in 1919 into a very wealthy and prominent family in Ahmedabad. His father, Ambalal Sarabhai, headed the Sarabhai group of companies and the extremely successful Calico Mills. Ambalal was a very fascinating person himself, but we don't have time to talk more about him, except that I will say that they were people of enormous wealth. I mean, perhaps, among the wealthiest people in the world. So if you had to kind of take a quick survey. Um, and he and his wife Sarla Devi were not just rich. They were also extremely cultured and an idealistic couple. They appreciated the arts, the sciences, and philosophy. They were visited by many famous people of the time, including actors, thinkers, and politicians. So, people like the actor Prithviraj Kapoor, for instance, the thinker J. Krishnamurti, the dancer Rukmini Arundel, Sarojini Naidu, Madan Mohan Malviya, and the Nehrus. And here we see the family with, again, a family, close family friend, Rabindranath Tagore. Um, this couple, Ambalal and Sarla Devi, were, as I said, very, very unconventional. And they were kind of people who thought very seriously about everything, about how to kind of model an ideal life. And so one of the things they did was they had 8 children, and they started a school for their children in their own, on their own kind of 19-acre property, which was called the Retreat. And it was based on the ideas of the Italian educationist Maria Montessori, who was at that time her work and her ideas were kind of quite spreading quite sort of far and wide across the world. Now, just to describe the school, it was not just something done randomly or done casually at all. This was an amazing experiment and on a really serious scale. There were a dozen odd teachers, of which 3 were PhDs, 3 were graduates from various European universities, and the rest were respected local stalwarts such as Karuna Shankar, who taught Sanskrit, the Cambridge trained mathematician S.H. Gidwani, and the poet Dhumketu. There were teachers for music, sports, a dancing teacher from the acclaimed Bengali Cultural Center Shantiniketan, and the curriculum included Gujarati, Sanskrit, Hindi, English, Bengali, history, geography, math, physics, chemistry, drawing, painting, dancing, music, pottery, handicrafts, and sculpture. For the athletically inclined, there were lessons in badminton, tennis, riding, archery, and yoga. For the artistic, instruments such as the sitar, the veena, the dilruba, the violin, and the tabla were provided. I'm sort of getting tired as I talk because you can't even imagine this kind of infrastructure for a small sort of school of 8 children. No distinctions were made between work and play. The children were encouraged to help in the aviary, the kitchen, and the cowshed, to manage cash and to look after guests. And the guiding principle of this system of education was the absence of force. J.S. Badami, a teacher, explained that the primary function of a teacher was considered not so much the imparting of knowledge as stimulating in the pupil its love and pursuit. This is the atmosphere in which Vikram Sarabhai grew up. But now, to understand his times more completely, we have to also understand what was going on at that point outside the walls of the retreat. It was also a time when India was in turmoil, and Indians were rising up against the British, leading to atrocities like the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which happened in the year of Vikram's birth, 1919. And as he grew up, the freedom struggle was snowballing with agitations and campaigns like the non cooperation movement. And the Sarabhais, despite their great wealth, were not kind of armchair idealists at all. They were extremely nationalistic. First of all, they were very close to Gandhi. There is a very well known story about Ambalal Sarabhai being an anonymous donor to Gandhi at a time when his ashram was shut down because the patron at that moment did not appreciate him inviting a scheduled caste couple to come and live there. Um, so Sarla Devi was even closer to Gandhi, and the family had cared for him through a serious illness when he convalesced at their home. Vikram's eldest sister, Mridula, and his aunt Ansuya were involved in the freedom struggle and were arrested often. Sarla Devi also went to jail. So this is a picture of Mridula. I'm sorry, Mridula with Gandhi. I mean, she of course is well known in her own right and was very active even after the freedom struggle. Now, the children witnessed these arrests, of their mother, of their aunt, of their sister. They also read, they were reading Young India and Navjivan, so they were they knew what was going on. They felt the fear and uncertainty and the sense of idealism. So, in my interviews with Vikram Sarabhai's siblings, I was told that, when the mother was taken away or a car was suddenly taken away to pay a fine and so on, it was a very frightening feeling. It was a feeling of loss. constantly, and fear and insecurity. And those days, children were also part of the campaign. They used to do sort of, they used to go around drumming up, little processions and things like that. So there would have been, I'm trying to picture Vikram Sarabhai at this young age. I've already described the school, but imagine him with this anti colonial struggle going on. And I think there would have been the fear and uncertainty and the kind of insecurity I've mentioned, but also a temptation to join, to do his bit for the struggle. Okay, keeping this background in mind, let me return to the photograph. In this picture, Vikram is probably about 11 years old, and that would be 1930. This is the year Gandhi set out on the Salt March from the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad. And the Sarabhais stayed the night before at the Sabarmati Ashram. So this is what is going on, in his sort of mind at this time. Um, But here he is. As I said, there is so much going on around him, but here he is, posing with a steam engine that he has built. We know that, at least that's what my research showed, that he took the help of a carpenter called Khimji Bai Mistri, who is possibly the one of the two gentlemen here. And Vikram was very proud of this train. His family members told me that when he was a child, he was very, very interested in playing with something called Junero, which was like a Meccano set. And he also had a toy train, which he was fascinated by. And this train apparently was built with kind of proper railway tracks, so it would go around and all that. So he was very proud of this. So I think that this photo sort of suggests a very early leaning towards science and technology. So let's just look at other things that were happening in the world around this time. The early 20th century was a very exciting time for science, particularly physics, with revolutionary advancements in quantum mechanics, relativity, and the exploration of particle physics, nuclear physics, and astrophysics. And you had great figures like Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Ernest Rutherford, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, and so on. Vikram, one of the things that was part of the school was that all the magazines would arrive, and so he would have had access to magazines. And at that time, the radio used to run a lot of programs for children on science. So he would have been hearing about all these developments. Now, once child Vikram showed this early love for science, then according to the Montessori method, it had to be encouraged, even though he was a kind of all rounder. But once he showed this leaning, so his parents, noting his interest in the mechanical, they made a workshop for him to encourage his interest and also added a physics and a chemistry lab. And this interest in science continued as he grew older. He did very well in physics and chemistry at Gujarat College, where he went for 2 years after finishing his schooling. And then he went on to Cambridge and the Indian Institute of Science here in Bangalore. So, even though events of great significance were taking place in the country and in the world, remember this was the period after World War One, and World War Two was just around the corner. So all this turmoil was happening. Vikram Sarabhai is fully aware of it, but his focus and concentration was on science. He went on to get a PhD at Cambridge on cosmic ray investigations in tropical latitudes. He helped the Nobel winning Robert Millikan with his balloon experiments in South India. And he came back from Cambridge and he set up the Physical Research Laboratory in 1947, which was a hub for many young scientists who came to form the nucleus of the space program. Now, most people, when I talk about Sarabhai, I always find people saying, "Oh, well, he was more about science applications," and so I think there is a kind of a tendency to not to assume that he did not continue with his science once he started building institutions, but that's not true. He always continued with his experiments and studies. He co-wrote some 80 scientific papers, and he derived great joy from the practice of science. But he was very unusual in the way he processed the idea of science. Bruno Rossi, the Italian American experimental physicist who is known for his pioneering work in cosmic ray physics and X ray astronomy, um, Vikram used to go every year to work with Bruno Rossi at MIT in the US. And Bruno Rossi said of Sarabhai that I believe that the stature of Vikram Sarabhai as a scientist depends not so much on any specific achievement as on the unique character of his scientific personality. So, now what is this unique character? I suggest that all the things that I have mentioned so far, the unusual school with its eclectic range of experiences, dance, sports, learning, the absence of sort of barriers between subjects, sort of fluidity that you could be learning, working in the aviary in the morning and then learning math soon after. Um, that kind of freedom and then the nationalistic fervor around him and a love for science all come together to make up this what we are calling this unique character. So let us try and understand this in Vikram Sarabhai's own words. He says, "A person who has imbibed the ways of science in a situation injects into a situation a new way of looking at it, hopefully, perhaps a degree of enlightenment with regard to the approach to problems. And this provides leadership, which is very valuable. Um, through experience, we know that conditions of work in India within our own specialized scientific fields rarely match the facilities available in several other countries. Some get frustrated striving against heavy odds, others leave the country. But those that can apply their insights to the problems of the community and of the nation discover an exciting area of activity where effort is rewarding even while the results show slowly." So, first of all, we see that Sarabhai was not someone who followed the herd. He made his own sense of what he learned and what he experienced. And for him, science, as we see, offered a new way of looking and an enlightenment towards intractable problems and leadership. Now, how did he see leadership? So, first of all, I suggest it was through focus and immersion in science. Not necessarily only the practice of science, but science as a way of life, science as a way of thinking, and science as an approach that allowed him to enter all other fields and provide them a certain unity. We also saw, as I was sort of talking earlier, that unlike others in his family, like Mridula and Ansuya and his own mother, and I mean, Vikram did not get drawn into political action and activism, even though, he has had, there is a sort of record of his having conversations with Gandhi. There is a record of him thinking about all this very much. But while it is a very noble thing to be kind of part of the freedom struggle, this was not Vikram's way. His way of serving the country was different. He served the country through science, but also through what he talks about, the new way of looking and the enlightenment and the leadership that he found through science. Now let's return to the photograph, and there is something else that is telling over here. You see that he is not alone. There are two men with him. One, as I said, was probably Kinjibai Mistri, the carpenter. The other may be his assistant or a helper from the retreat. But they have helped him in his endeavor, and that's why they're kind of proudly posing together. Now, this kind of takes us to an important aspect of science in the early 20th century, which was collaboration. Collaboration came in many forms. There was collaboration across national boundaries, across regions, across age and class. So let's take class, for instance. In the world, but more so in India, you, at least at that time, had to make instruments by hand. The instruments or the experiments that were set up could involve working with glass, metal, and electricity. Many required craft skills and physical labor, which scientists were not always equipped with. And Vikram was always appreciative of the craftspeople who worked for the laboratory and often stopped to say hello before going up to his office at the physical research laboratory. There was also an expert mechanic called Ratilal Panchal, who should be in our kind of, when we talk about the history of the space program. He was flown to Tumba for the very first rocket launch in November 1963. And this was a kind of, as you are aware, it was a very big event. But at the very last minute, it was discovered that the payload would not fit into the rocket. And so Ratilal Panchal had to scrape it by hand. So we kind of owe him much. Vikram was very keen on self reliance, but he believed in exchange and he believed in alliances. He would seek alliances, whether it was with central or state governments, with funding institutions, with like minded people, and so on. Padmanav Joshi, in his study, Vikram Sarabhai, a study on innovative leadership and institution building, writes that Vikram consciously tempered his own prominence to avail of the benefits of partnership. This is really a rare quality. to not let your ego and jealousy come in the way of cooperation. And Vikram Sarabhai did not, from what one can see of his career, sort of allow himself to indulge in that kind of false egocentrism. There was a concept that Vikram Sarabhai talked about quite often, which he called, well, it was called mutuality, which the concept was proposed by the psychologist Erik Erikson, who said, I would call mutuality a relationship in which partners depend on each other for the development of their respective strengths. As I said, even though it makes sense, it's very rare for people to actually allow this to kind of be a way to live their lives and run their careers. But Vikram Sarabhai collaborated with numerous people in the course of his life. So here is one very important collaborator. This is Kasturbhai Lalbhai. He was a leading textile mill owner of his time in the 40s and the 50s. Belonged to a family of Nagar Sheths of Ahmedabad, which is a kind of position of some leadership. And he ran the Ahmedabad Education Society. He was Vikram's father's sort of friend. He was Ambalal, but younger than Ambalal. But there was a great affection and respect between Kasturbhai Lalbhai and Vikram. It was not exactly, it was not father and son, because I guess Ambalal Sarabhai was a doting father. But it was a kind of very unusual friendship, very unique and mutually respectful friendship. And one of the earliest examples of their collaboration was the Ahmedabad Textile Industries Research Association. Um, so this was in 1944, the government of India had set up the Industrial Research Planning Committee to encourage industrial research. And the committee came to Ahmedabad to make the textile community, it was a town of textile mills, aware of the government's interest. And Kasturbai asked Vikram, who was going to Cambridge to study the structures of industrial research institutions in the UK and in Europe. And when he returned, the two came together to set up ATIRA, the first Indian Industrial Research and Development Unit, modeled on the lines of research associations in Britain and to be run on cooperative lines. And this became a model for research associations in other parts of the country. Vikram's other important collaborator was Homi Bhabha, of course, very, very well known chief of the Atomic Energy Commission, founder of TIFR, and very important figure. And he and Vikram Sarabhai met at the IISc when they were both stranded there during World War II. And much of what has been achieved in space, and of course, then Vikram Sarabhai went on to become chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. So this was a very important partnership as well. Vikram Sarabhai also collaborated with his wife, Mrinalini, who was a dancer, to set up the Dance Academy Darpana. And he collaborated with the educator Kamla Chaudhary to set up the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. And then, of course, there were, I cannot, I'm not naming everyone that he collaborated with. There were many, and in various fields, as you've already seen. But there were also, of course, very importantly, scientists like K.R. Ramanathan, S.S. Bhatnagar, Jivraj Mehta, who was a politician. And science also, of course, required teamwork. And so from the age of 28, when Vikram started building institutions, he was working with people very closely. So students, subordinates, elders, seniors, people from different locations, backgrounds, and temperaments. And of course, a host of people abroad here, people like Chitnis, Professor Chitnis, U.R. Rao, APJ Abdul Kalam, etc. So just a photograph to just, him with his some colleagues, and to stress the importance of mutuality and collaboration in Vikram Sarabhai's career. So now we're going to move to another picture. I should tell you, of course, that it is not a real picture. It's AI generated. And I think Sarabhai would have got a little kick out of it. So that's why I thought I should go ahead and do it. So here is a photograph. What I have done is, okay, so there's the story behind the photograph is that one of his teachers, I came across this anecdote that one of his teachers said that when he was around 7 or 8, he was a very good cyclist and used to cycle extremely fast and then jump up on the handlebars. And then he would kind of cross his, I don't think we've got that very well, but I think he would cross his sort of, arms across his chest, and sometimes close his eyes if the road was straight. And this would terrify, of course, the helpers who were supposed to look after him. But he used to love doing that. And so I kind of generated this with his photograph, but it's not real. Um, but I think that what this photo communicates is a sense of fearlessness, challenge, and risk. And so let me try and kind of demonstrate how these traits manifested themselves in Sarabhai's career, in particular in the space program. So post World War II, you had these sort of big, powerful countries in the world exploring space for scientific and military purposes. And of course, also for show, there was this very fierce competition between Cold War adversaries, the US and the Soviet Union. The Russians sent Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, to orbit Earth, and then the Americans landed men on the moon in 1969. And in between, of course, there were many efforts to send animals to space and to kind of sort of beat each other. So just um, so this was going on, and here we have India, newly independent with immense problems of poverty, illiteracy, and poor health. How could it even think of entering such a sophisticated and expensive technological area of space? But not only did India launch a space program, it also did it on its own terms. And I'm not to take away with other people, I mean, there was Jawaharlal Nehru and there was Homi Bhabha, and there were a lot of people who kind of have to be given credit for launching the space program. But since we are focusing on Vikram Sarabhai, then I want to kind of show how the kind of space program that we had and came to have, how it reflected his peculiar personality. So much has been written about the early days of the space program, and I assume many of you will have seen pictures of the early days when scientists were working in a kind of wilderness using bullock carts and bicycles. And so, this kind of frugality, I should point out, is a very Ahmedabadi quality, the city that Vikram Sarabhai, who was actually a billionaire, came from. Um, and of course, it also reflects a collaborative spirit. As I said, that there were other people very important people who were supporting the kind of launching of a space program. And so here is just to kind of a photograph of Vikram Sarabhai and Homi Bhabha as they're scouting for land. They're scouting for locations for a sounding rocket program. Now, let us consider Sarabhai's thinking and vision behind the space program. Just let me have a look at the time. Ooh, got out. So, from the very beginning, the thrust of the space program was peaceful. This was the opposite of what I said about the impulse in the world being largely military. Second, it was not meant for show. In one of his talks, Sarabhai made it very clear that in India, the immediate goals of our space research are modest. We do not expect to send a man to the moon or put elephants white, pink, or black into orbit around the Earth. This, of course, was a jibe at the two superpowers, but it also mirrored an extremely serious concern about the possibility of the space program being hijacked from his desired social aims. There is a real danger, he points out, that developing nations may adopt a space program largely for this glamour, devoting resources not through a recognition of the values of which we are talking about here, but from a desire to create a sham image nationally and internationally. So he was very, very upfront that this was not what India was going to do. Third, he saw no contradiction between the sophistication of the technology and the country's backwardness. In fact, his view was this: there are those who preach that developing nations must proceed step by step, following the same process by which the advanced nations themselves progressed. One is told that such and such a thing is too sophisticated to be applied. This approach disregards what should perhaps be obvious, that when a problem is great, one requires the most effective means available to deal with it. So Sarabhai actually saw the space program as a means of addressing India's problems, of linking technology with development, of serving the needs of the masses while nurturing a highly sophisticated work culture and scientific abilities. So one of his favorite phrases was leapfrogging, which referred to his great faith in the ability of technology to enable the developing countries to short circuit the long, arduous process followed by the Western world. So let us quickly look at the objectives he set for the space program. I'm going to go a little fast so that we can get on to our conversation. Long range weather forecasting applications in agriculture, forestry, oceanography, geology, mineral prospecting, and cartography. Besides applications, Vikram Sarabhai believed that many benefits would accrue from the very existence of the space program itself. Its potential to stimulate growth in advanced fields such as electronics, chemicals, cybernetics, and in materials engineering. The possibility of collaborative relationships with organizations, scientists, and technologists in foreign lands, and crucially, the nucleus of a new culture where people in diverse activities learn to work together for the purpose of a single objective. So, here again, we're talking about collaboration and mutuality. And this program actually was quite a path breaking program, and was, according to international scholars, caused quite a big sensation internationally among scholars of space science. Sarabhai himself says that there is a totality about modernization, and in order to gain confidence, we must experiment within our resources, even at the risk of failure. This is something very brave to say, because I think that most people do not want to admit the possibility of failure. So he says you have to rise from an inbuilt culture within which a major departure from an existing well proven system and anything which is innovative in character is automatically regarded with suspicion. So I'm just going to briefly refer to one of his most innovative programs, the famous SITE experiment of 1975-6, which just completed 50 years. This is Vikram Sarabhai signing an agreement with NASA, Thomas Paine of NASA. So the idea was this. Vikram Sarabhai had been talking for years about using satellites for communications. I mean, in 1963 is when he kind of first mentioned it, at least according to his colleagues. And this was not even at that point something that was recognized as kind of widely talked about in the world yet. But in 1969, NASA offered a communications transponder in the Applications Technology satellite for a pioneering exercise in using communications technology for development. And so here they are signing an agreement. The plan was to beam signals that could be uplinked from an Earth station in Ahmedabad and beamed to 2,400 villages in India. These would be instructional programs in health, education, and so on. And they would be received by a community set, one community set placed in each of 2,400 locations in 6 states. All this ground equipment, the Earth station, TV sets, adapters were entirely designed and developed in India. Each TV was connected to a 10-foot chicken mesh antennas. TV sets were run on batteries very often because electricity was low in some places. So lots of what you would call jugaad. Um, Also, thousands of teachers were trained in the locations. So you also had feedback loops, and it was a kind of very, very elaborately designed experiment. It actually took place after Vikram Sarabhai had passed away, but it was all very, very much, planned and kind of thought of while he was still alive. Site revolutionized rural education and led to the very rapid expansion of television in India in the early 1980s. In the sense that, by example, when India adopted a hybrid model of distribution using ground level transmitters and satellites. And it also laid the foundation for the world now knows as direct to home. Um, Arthur C. Clarke called it, this is just one of the sites. You see villagers watching something on television. Arthur C. Clarke called it the greatest communication experiment in history. So let us look at this photo again. And let's look at the kind of risk, this is the child who would grow up to start the space program, but not a risk that was, I'd say, kind of careless. It was a risk that was calculated. So now, today we have a space program which is widely acknowledged for its success on many fronts. And it is a good time, this is a good time to talk about its founder and his ideas for the space program. Uh, but we can also talk about a kind of more holistic and his multifaceted vision, which combines the rigor of the classical arts, the aesthetics and functionality of design, the wonders of technology, the insights of psychology and management, and the necessities of business, all united by a love of the scientific approach. So, today we kind of talk a lot about New India, and there's a great deal of excitement in the air about the building of a new India. But I find that we're talking a lot about economics and infrastructure. And I thought that, in Vikram Sarabhai, we have an extraordinary modernizer and innovator. And so to look at that vision that has already sort of endured all this time and benefited us is something that would, I think, be of great use. So I'm going to stop now and look forward to talking to Janvi.
First of all, thanks to BIC for having me here on this stage. It seems like this is the precise seat in which I sit to talk to friends and colleagues and students about their new books. It's also probably a hint that I should be soon writing my own. But in the meanwhile, uh, thank you, Amrita, for agreeing to speak with me about this wonderful book of yours. Um, the first time I read this book was in 2008, just after I had late 2007, early 2008 is when I read the book. I had just finished my PhD, and so I had time on my hands. And I was astonished at by many things, which we will come to in our, as we progress in the conversation. First of all, because we don't really have what one might call mature biographies of Indian figures, especially scientists. In fact, I cannot think of a comparable book to this written about any other scientists of India, right? Like we have hagiographies, we have books that mark scientific contributions, so on and so forth. But biographies, like we see, even of relatively, I forget Oppenheimer, who's an incredibly well-known figure, if controversial, but even sort of uh, relatively less known figures like Dirac, you would have a fabulous biography of him too, and so on and so forth. So that's something that's missing. And so for someone to actually in 2007 have published a biography, and that too of a scientist, as a writer who's not a science writer, was in itself an astonishing thing. And so congratulations for having thought of that, because the book was well ahead of its time. So here's the thing, right? Like when I think of Vikram Sarabhai as a figure, I can think of three concentric circles. There's the Sarabhai of Ahmedabad who transformed the family, and especially him, transformed the city, added layers to it. It's, we're not talking about someone who goes and breaks ground, but breaks new ground, right? So there's Ahmedabad being transformed by the vision and the institution building activities of Vikram Sarabhai, apart from the Sarabhai family. At level two, or the level or the second circle in this sort of set of concentric circles, is the India, a newly independent India during the Cold War, being transformed by another set of institutions with wild ambition being built by this Vikram Sarabhai. And then there's the third, which is the international arena in which Vikram Sarabhai operates, initially with Homi Bhabha and later on his own, unfortunately not for very long. I mean, when you say 52, it's really scary that, we lost someone that productive, that eminent, that wonderfully engaged person. But there is that arena in which he also occupied a fairly important role, because this program started, the space program in India, and again, I will do my best to stay sort of as holistic about him as you have been, because his personality exceeds the space program in a multitude of ways, right? So there are these three circles within which each of which he occupies a fairly eminent position. He's seen as someone who scientists at NASA can speak to about their science. He has a PhD in cosmic ray physics. And people in India, ranging from the first prime minister to colleagues like Bhabha and Mahalanobis, who can talk to him as an equal. But he's also part of the Ahmedabad society, where Lalbhai, others can talk to him as a person who's transforming a city. Holding hands as he moves along the way, collaboration, as you spoke about. So I think it's just astonishing that there would be a personality of this kind. So the first question I'm going to ask you is why? Why did you think of writing a biography of a scientist at the time that you did? Because it wasn't the normal thing to do. What brought you to writing this book?
So I talk about it in my introduction, and I'm going to make it very short, though it's long, the answer. But I was introduced to Sarabhai when I was 9 years old, and when he died, I mean, I saw the newspaper come, and my mother kind of go like that, you know. So I said, "What happened?" And she said, "A great scientist died." And I was so surprised because my mother was not really interested in science. I'd never heard her express any interest. So I was trying to peek at what, and and I saw the name. I saw Vikram Sarabhai dead, and I saw the photograph and all that. And then we kind of over the next a couple of days we watched, and she told me a little bit about the family. She was very much into classical dance, so she told me that he had married someone from the south. Now this is a big thing in those days because it's the West marrying someone from the south, and she was a dancer, and she, you know, my mother admired that a lot. And then we watched, we kind of read the newspaper together, and when dignitaries sort of flowed in, and you know, we kind of, I saw what an important man. And then his son was away in the US, so the daughter Malika lit the funeral pyre. And so in my mind he became this figure of modernity, if you see what I mean, because for a young person at this point just beginning to learn physics, and he was already that glamour plus, you know, all the other things, and then this feminist daughter. And so I think I kind of, he grew in my mind as a figure of modernity. And then for many years, I did not hear about him or anything till I started writing a book on television. And when you write, you know, when you work on television history in India, you come across Vikram Sarabhai because he had an idea for everything, for the content, for the program, for the technology. He was a very, very important figure in that. So I came. So that's when I kind of, it was like meeting an old acquaintance almost. And I came across this one page, kind of, someone had written just one page on him, talking about all the various things he did. He started India's first market research agency. You know, he was making pharmaceuticals. He had very interesting ideas on the bomb, which were not clear what they were. So I started getting this very sort of this interest, but I couldn't find anything to read on him. And so there's a kind of personal element in the sense that my mother passed away. I was passing through Ahmedabad, and I saw Vikram Sarabhai's name everywhere. And so I think it was a way for me to almost connect with her, where I started saying, I want to read about him. There was no book. So then I guess I had to write it. That's how it
Well,
actually.
no better way to write the book you want to read. So let me ask you a little bit about the response the first time around. Because now, in many ways, we know why we are looking at this book, right? Like the Indian space program is, well, we've landed on the dark side of the moon. Um, there is celebration about the space program, but this is a nascent program, right? And in 2007, we are still, yes, we have a fleet of communication satellites. We have a program that is consolidating. We have a program that's sort of, but the ambitions are of the last 20 years, right? So what was the response to your book when it first came out?
Right. Actually, before it came out, there were many publishers who said, "Who? Why?" uh, you know. And so it was a very odd thing for me because, as I told you, this little bit of inspirational beginning that I had, that, you know, he has a charisma, which I find like it's floating, you know, and a lot of people know the charisma. And then there are many people who over the years, and of course we become so ahistorical, that, you know, there was a whole sort of, two generations that had not even heard his name. So I literally, when I was trying to find a publisher, it was hard, and I never expected it to be hard. You know, I thought there would be. It understood that there's a need for this book, but I think I also kind of understood that history writing, and you would know also that it happens at its own pace. I don't know what happens when something is in the air, and I think that moment is in the air now that Vikram Sarabhai is kind of, the charisma matches the person and his achievements. But you're right. In 2007, when the book came out, well, I had a hard, as I said, trying to kind of sell it. I mean, I didn't have such a hard time. Of course, there was Penguin did publish it readily, but it was initially a bit difficult. People didn't quite understand what I was doing and who was this person. But then once the book came out, I think it was reviewed very, very widely. And so there was this recognition. But it was reviewed, but I think for some reason, because there were some publishing issues, because the publishing house had a turnover of its senior editors.
Mhm.
It kind of disappeared, the book. And then in 2016, I think there was another change of guard, and then I managed to kind of say, please, the space program is really building up. So we brought it out again as a paperback, and of course, it's been selling very well, and year on year, because something's happening all the time now.
Wonderful. I hope you
Yeah.
can renegotiate your contract. So let me ask you a question, because you have really, in a way, when one writes a biography, one sort of gets to know the person, right? And one lives with the person. I haven't written one, but of course I know that. So if I were to think of Satish Dhawan, the person who picked up the program after the extremely untimely passing away of Sarabhai, Dhawan brought structure to the space program, right? Like, it is today what it is because of how Dhawan understood the moving parts of the space program coming together. What was the scale, the ambition? How do these parts relate to each other? How do you recruit? How do you train? He set it in motion, right? Like, so in a way, his vision was that of structuring the space program. I think it would be probably, in a way, tried to say that Sarabhai's contribution to the space program was vision. So I'm going to ask you to unpack that for us, because clearly there is an imprint of the just audacious ambition, right? Because the Indian space program, so it started as INCOSPAR, the Indian Committee on Space and Research. Yeah, exactly. INCOSPAR is barely 4 years within the establishment of NASA and COSPAR, which was the international sort of agency for it. So, and it starts in the Department of Atomic Energy, right? Like, first, INCOSPAR is incubated within the Atomic Energy Commission. Sorry. So, if you were to give us a perspective on what was this vision, so if Dhawan was structure, what was Sarabhai?
Well, first of all, so I have to bring in Gopal Raj's comment on this. And I have been on the IIC campus for many years. So the Dhawan Sarabhai thing has been thrown at me a lot. It's like, oh, Sarabhai was nothing and Dhawan was everything. And I think they were both great men
Of course.
with, of course, very, very great contributions each. So I just wanted to, because I'm not a space, a reporter in that sense, an expert on space, but Gopal Raj has written this wonderful book, which helped me a lot to understand the beginnings of the space program. He says that this sort of innovative program could only start like that, in that sort of madcap way, without, and he says that perhaps Sarabhai, had he lived, would be forced to kind of, bring in the structures and bring in. But of course, which Satish Dhawan took over and did brilliantly. But I think what Sarabhai's vision, it was a parallel vision. You see him doing everything together. It's not like he's not doing the technology part and he's doing only the end purpose, like what are the goals, or he's doing everything together. So, for instance, he finishes. He's kind of, I think Indira Gandhi comes and there's some event, and immediately he's talking to about an SLV, like building a satellite launch vehicle. There's no time wasted. He's starting with sounding rockets, then immediately going on to the next step. So technologically, it's almost as if he's throwing things. And then with the kind of propellant, for instance, one of his ways of working was that he would give the same challenge, apparently, to one or more people. Okay. And then let them kind of compete in this wild wilderness that they were working. And I must say, he must have done it pretty deftly, because I don't really see, I'm sure there were little rancor in
No, of
between or
course.
whatever, but it didn't sort of seem to erupt in any kind of way. And it seemed to be, at least from some of the people I've talked to in the space program in those days, was quite a productive way to do that. So I think, how do I see it? I think that he had this big vision and he was not afraid of it. And I think that is very important, because sometimes you can have all the imagination in the world, but to actually put it in motion, to be responsible for all these people and the country's money and everything, but he had it, and I think that his sort of enormous wealth and kind of stature in the world, which to some extent Baba also had.
Absolutely.
But I think that Sarabhai had it even more because he was hobnobbing with the Rockefellers and I mean, Nobel Prize winning laureate. There was no kind of nothing that he would have felt, kind of not able to meet, socially. So I think that helped give him the confidence to set this vision, to launch it, and then when all these people come, because he's hiring young students who are leaving jobs abroad, and with nothing, just this sort of wilderness and this idea that there will be a space program. And Vasant Gowarikar, for instance, comes from London, and he inspires them, and he manages. So I think it's like a dream. They all often when they talk about it, even as men of 70 and 80, they're talking about the dream. They're talking about how Sarabhai gave us a dream. We felt so kind of involved, and it was as if there were no fetters to your imagination. You could just get caught up. So I think that was probably his most valuable contribution. I mean, and I think that, he was a manager of people because he's done Attira, where he's cut his teeth on all these institutions. He's already started PRL. He started Attira, where there was a lot of animosity between the mill owners and the mill workers. Everyone was suspicious of what was going on. It was not easy for a 28-year-old to do all that. So he's already done this. He started the Ahmedabad Management Association. He's started, the founding of IIM and ID. All that has happened. So he's come to the space with all that experience, and he's run companies, big companies where. So
I'm glad you brought up Homi Bhabha because I do see sort of a lot of parallels between them. I mean, Homi Bhabha's mother came from the Tata family. So Sarabhai, of course, directly from the Sarabhai family. So there is a lot of confidence that there is there is also some ability to think at scale. And I think you see that in both. And of course, also a sense of style.
yes.
Homi Bhabha, known for his
Absolutely.
Italian socks and his Savile Row suits. In that sense, I think, well, there's a difference, but we can come to that. And interestingly, both of them Cambridge PhDs.
Yes.
Sarabhai, of course, slightly younger to Bhabha, and they spent the war years, the Second World War years, as you spoke about Millikan's experiments, at the Indian Institute of Science. So C.V. Raman invites both of them, nominates both of them to a fellowship of the Royal Society, which they both receive in 1944 during the war, which is sort of also astonishing. And they spend their time here. And as legend goes, both spent their time at the West End.
Yes.
So that's where they partied together.
Yes.
And that's, of course, also one of those parties is where he met Mrinalini Sarabhai.
Yes, I think it's probably part of the group.
Part of the group, of course.
There was a group of intellectuals,
Yeah.
including two Sri Lankan, an architect and
There you go.
her sister. So yeah.
Yeah. So there is an interesting coincidence of them being together, what one might today call hanging out together, and then both setting out to establish institutions initially of fundamental research.
Yes.
So Bhabha goes on to establish the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research and then the Atomic Energy Program. And Sarabhai goes on to establish the Plasma Research Laboratory in PRL. Yes, I did get that right. In Ahmedabad, and then goes on to establish the Indian Space Program.
Right.
So there is sort of that interesting, journey of two similar men with similar-ish
Yes.
backgrounds that take this thing a little further. Is there something that you were able to capture during your research about the relationship between the two men?
I think the fact of the relationship is captured in my book. I don't think that if you find it in other, because nuclear history doesn't look into the personal relations so much. So actually bringing them together, the West End partying, because these other scientists told me, generally scientists were from kind of middle class families and more from the East and the South. And they said, we used to look very enviously at these two
Very
men
stylish
taking
men.
off in the evenings, to go to the West End. So I think that actually that relationship, that arc of the relationship, because then I talk about how they differed on the bomb, not contemporaneously, but they had, I think, different approaches. I think that is, I think, what I have built, that arc, the friendship. And I did wonder at this coincidence. Okay, so they're stranded there during the war. I understand that. There's sort of Brahman is there. I understand all that. Millikan comes, all that. But the fact that they then go on to do this tandem, this kind of. So I wonder, as young men, did they walk, in those dark sort of under the trees and discuss this?
Yeah.
Because there's almost a feeling of one by one they start
Yep.
doing these things.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think that what Bhabha's interest was in the sort of atomic power, right? But I think Sarabhai was looking at cosmic rays externally, like to understand conditions in outer space.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of interesting synergy and difference, which kind of dovetails into each other, but isn't competing in that sense.
Hmm.
And it's quite wondrous that these two people could work together so harmoniously.
Yeah.
I am quite struck by that, because you know how it would normally be. There would be competition, there would be egos. So I'm not quite sure. I do think that there must have been, and I think Sarabhai, because since I have not studied Bhabha, I've only studied Bhabha in relation to Sarabhai. But I think that Sarabhai, if you see throughout his career, as I tried to show, he builds collaborations with all kinds of people,
Mhm.
and he actively does that. And he Ashish Nandi, who's of course a very astute psychologist, told me that he didn't have that kind of false ego. He didn't mind working with someone who he knew was more intelligent than him.
Mm.
And that he says it's very rare, but I also, of
Mm.
course it's very rare. So I think that he did actively. And so maybe that somehow helped pave the way for this. But I don't know, because I think when I think of Bhabha, and this is not necessarily true, I'm just saying when I think of him,
Mm.
I think of him more as a kind of lone figure,
Mhm.
even though, of course, he built an institution and, there were colleagues and all who revered him. But I don't, like when you think of Sarabhai, he seems much more lovable
Mhm.
because of the way people talk about him. When they talk about Bhabha, it's with admiration, respect, reverence. But with here, it's just pure love. And tears. And I took his photograph home. I couldn't bear to when I had to leave the office, and that kind of teary love, because I think he was very, very jolly, cheerful, very, So I wonder if he evoked in Bhabha a sort of I don't know. I don't like to put brother or father or but a certain
Relationship of mentorship, probably.
yes, slightly.
Could be.
Slightly. And I don't even think it's mentorship. It's something, because if you see, neither ever. They're both doing their own thing. There's never a sense of, So I don't, there is no word for it. But he seemed to evoke that in Kasturbai Lalbhai. That kind of willingness to just trust and put your money on this horse sort of thing. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, both Bhabha and Sarabhai started out as cosmic ray physicists, right?
Yes.
Like both got their
Yes.
PhDs in cosmic ray physics. Bhabha went the internal way into
Exactly,
the
yeah.
atomic nucleus, and
Yes.
Sarabhai continued, to do something else with it. Well, the external world, the space, as you said it, and this knowledge was useful because this is how he was able to then identify where. Well, that Tumba would be the right location
Right.
for a satellite launch because of its proximity to the geomagnetic
Yes.
equator and so on
Yes.
and so forth. So that's kind of something that keeps coming back also, because at times Bhabha also talks about why that is so important for Indian science. Now, let me kind of ask you, sort of, let me grow the story as you have. If one were to write a prosopography around Sarabhai, right? Like, so basically a sort of a collective biography of him. Who would be the characters? Some of them you've named already, but let's try to see if one can come up with a list, and if some missing characters kind of show up. Who would be the people from the Ahmedabad circle? Who would be the people from the India circle? And who would be the people from sort of, the international circle? That would, in a way, complete the story, but the various interfaces, for lack of a better word, that he would have had to make us, for us to understand a man in context.
Right. So I think some of them, I mean, most of them are in the book. I've quoted from them. So let's say an unexpected figure would be someone like Prakash Tandon,
Hmm.
who was the first Indian chief of Hindustan Lever, Unilever, after independence, once they kind of started hiring Indian. And he's an odd person to think of, but he's written this beautiful book called Punjabi Saga, in which I found such wonderful references and very thoughtful references to his experience of Ahmedabad and of meeting the Sarabhais. Because there's a description of the Sarabhai household, the kind of records, the kind of mishmash of things in the house, which is slightly European, slightly American, slightly, it's an Indian, all combined. But and also the oddity of the Ahmedabad Seths, of how they were very brisk with you. They'd invite you, they'd welcome you, and then they'd be very brisk, and sort of, not very warm after that. But that didn't mean anything. It didn't mean that they did not like you or something. It was their manner. So okay, so there's Prakash Tandon, and also because he's involved with IIM later. So then that becomes one odd kind of, he's a non-scientific figure. And then Bruno Rossi's wife, Nora, I think is her name. She writes about how Vikram Sarabhai would come every year, I think in summer, or there was a certain time when he'd come, full of joie de vivre and sort of. And I think there's a little bit of because he's kind of good looking and charming, and so a lot of people refer to that side. So I think that Bruno Rossi would. So am I doing what you're asking me to do?
Yes.
Okay. Who else? Kasturba Lalbai, I think, but that is a relationship that really fascinates me. That they talked about philosophy, they talk about so I think that kind of, I think if you put all these figures together, what I'm myself as I'm speaking to you getting is Vikram Sarabhai's ability to be with so many different kinds of people, So there is, of course, his wife Mrinalini, his children, and then Kamla Chaudhary, who, of course, he had a very close relationship with, and was very important figure in his life, who co-founded. I mean, not co-founded, but she was with him as when the IIM was being so kind of planning for it and how to set it in motion and everything. And of course, she was also the other woman in his life, which I write about.
So let me ask you sort of more directly. Both Homi Bhabha, since he's the shadow in this conversation, given because of my familiarity with him, I even dreamt of him once when I was finishing my thesis. Not a I knew I had to finish writing when that happened. But both had were relatively tormented personal lives, right? Like, I mean, Homi Jahangir Bhabha, one can't say lived with, but had for all of his adult life had a relationship with a woman he could not marry or live with, which was Pipsi Wadia. And Sarabhai, who was married out of love, and met another woman later in his life and had a tormented relationship with both of them until the end of his life. And what I really remember from reading the book the first time was the maturity with which you handled the torment in the relationship for all parties involved. Would you like to share with us your observations on what it meant for him personally, but also what that meant in terms of the establishment of the institution and later the erasure of Kamala from the story of IIM Ahmedabad?
Right. So Kamala was Mrinalini's friend. They had studied together at Shantiniketan. And so, when she comes into his life, Mrinalini is a very busy dancer. She's traveling a lot. And so they get thrown together because she comes to work for Atira. And she has her own very traumatic past. Her husband has been shot dead in a completely random manner. So she's a young widow, very, very young, attractive widow who comes, and very intelligent. You think of a young widow at that time. It's hard, but she's actually studied. She's gone abroad and got a PhD from Harvard, yes. So, and psychology, and she studied mathematics before that. So she's kind of very unusual person. And so they start a relationship, which, I mean, clearly is a very, very serious relationship. And I think even when Prakash Tandon writes about them, he doesn't write about them directly. He just sort of is mentioning meeting them. And he says, they were always very serious in the sense, not serious as in not humorous, but whatever they talked about was serious. It was not frivolous or so I think that there were intellectual engagements between, it was a sort of also a cerebral relationship, which is very rare, and I think he had that both with his wife and with Kamla, so I think that to that extent you can make out the kind of women and the kind of relationships that he kind of sought were of at least of some form of equality. Now, Kamla was very important figure in the founding of IIMA, and she was not made director at some point. That it was assumed that she would be, and it's not Sarabhai's fault in that sense. He was very hurt himself by that, and he kind of retreated away from IIM, and so it was not in that sense his decision. He fought for her, from what I can find, that he did fight for her, and then he didn't succeed, and he felt hurt, and I mean it was all a kind of not a very happy situation at that time. The reason they say why Kamla was not made, the official reason or whatever, is that she was not she was not sort of forthcoming enough, or now, I don't know whether that's the usual kind of prejudice or bias, the way a woman runs things and the way a man runs things.
Well, I mean, the Indian Institute of Science has still not had a female director. So I think there
True.
are
Yes.
unarticulated assumptions about what a woman is
Oh,
able to do and not
absolutely.
able to do. And
Exactly, exactly. And what
yeah,
should be done?
yeah.
Why try it? No, try with a woman in charge and let's see. But anyway, I'm so happy we're two women here talking about this. So yeah. But I think yes, she was not made director, and that hurt him. Um, she continued to live in Ahmedabad though, and she continued to teach at IIM, and their relationship continued till he died. So it didn't. I don't think it altered the relationship. I'm sure it went through a period of tension, or there must have been some sort of fallout. But yes, and I think it was a very intense relationship, because I met Kamla. I was sort of, I went to interview her in Delhi because she had moved to Delhi afterwards, and she'd set up an institute with his name on it. It was in Vikram Sarabhai. I forget the whole name. And she was, she kind of had been done very interesting work on the environment and various other policy matters and things like that. So she hadn't kind of given up her, she was still busy and very productive. But I could see, that this was, of course, a very, very important relationship in her life, and it continued to be that. And when I asked her about it, she told me how they met, and she told me how, the sort of evolution of the relationship, and I can, I mean, it was a difficult situation, but I think what I admired, or what I found unusual, was that there was no subterfuge about it. It was what it was, in the sense that there was no attempt to hide it. There was no apology, no. I mean, and of course, between Vikram Sarabhai and Mrinalini, there were conversations which Mrinalini told me about, and so it was hurtful to everyone, very, very painful. But it wasn't. It was an adult relationship that is life is complicated, and there was that admission of that. Because I think once Mallika, that's Vikram's daughter, asked her father, "Why don't you leave Kamla?" And he said, even if I leave her, she'll be like that shadow limb. And so, basically, he was trying to say, look, it's not so easy. It's and I think one of the things that I write about Vikram Sarabhai's personality was his ability to tolerate ambivalence, which I think is a very, very rare quality, along with, being able to collaborate. The ability to say that I don't, I mean, I don't know how I feel about this, or I do know, but I can't do anything about it. And the ability to live with it, not to, immediately take out something or trying to make yourself comfortable. He could sort of sustain. And I think that's kind of a very mature attitude.
Also difficult, incredibly
Very,
difficult. And I
yeah.
think, again, we saw that also with Homi Bhabha, sort of, that this is my life, this is not going to
Right.
change. And yet everybody around him knew, right? Like, including his colleagues
Yes. Oh,
abroad and in
yes.
India, everybody knew about
Yes.
Pipsi. They'd met Pipsi. I mean, she was the host
Yes.
of
Yes.
all of his parties.
Yes.
So you know, the number of institutions that you spoke about. I mean, if you even let's start even with his home, right, Chidambaram. You walk into sort of, it slightly goes up, and then there's this beautiful but ambiguous Ganesha,
Right.
and placed on the floor.
Right.
And then you go in, and there are Jain figures.
Mhm.
There's sort of, artisanal works on the walls, silk
Yes.
paintings,
Mhm.
the beautiful sort of glass facade that looks
Mhm.
over
The
the
lawn,
Sabarmati,
yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And so there's art and there's design,
Mhm.
all of which, again, sort of like the IIM Ahmedabad project, convenes on one word, which is development.
Yeah.
Right? So, because if you look at the National Institute of Design, it is design for development.
Mhm.
If you look at
Yes. Yes.
IIM Ahmedabad, it was administration for development. In fact, when I
Yes.
was young, there was a subject called development administration that was
Mhm.
actually taught.
Hmm.
Like the IITs, the IIMs was set up,
Yeah.
well, engineers for
To
India,
create
administrators
managers for
for
the
India,
public sector.
for managers
Yeah.
for the public sector.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we find now is
Yes.
that, effectively investment bankers and people who administer
That's
very
right.
different kind of
That's right,
corporations.
yes.
So in many ways, the vision for development, space for development, management for development, manufacturing for development, design for development, that word itself has lost balance. Science for development as well. I mean, in fact, he has a book called Science for
Yes.
Development. All of that has lost balance today. So if, and this is my last question to you, if one were to today remember Vikram, and I call him Vikram like I knew him, right?
Well, I do
Well, I
too.
call Homi as well. What would be the way in which to remember him?
So for me, you asked me in the beginning why I did this book, and I gave you the kind of long story. But I think what for me Vikram Sarabhai has always sort of represented is the idealism of the post-independence era, which was that, and I quote some of the other figures like Raj Thapar and various people, J.R.D. Tata. Everyone, whether you're an industrialist, you're a housewife, everyone is talking about what can we do for India, how can we build India. And I think that to me Vikram Sarabhai represented in some ways the idealism and the involvement of everyone. It wasn't like you had to be in politics to think of what to do, or didn't have to be head of some industry or what. All of us, so, it was like in our own way. So there was that fervor, and for me, I feel like we are at that moment in a way when everyone's talking about New India, let's build a New India. And yet, when we talk about New India, it's usually infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about him, and so if I had to remember him in that sense, it's this sort of holistic vision where you are thinking of taking very sophisticated, whether it's technology, design, art, or whatever, and linking it to the upliftment of the poorest. Now, how he does it, of course, you can debate that and have conversations about it. But that idea of that whole arc, and having all that, the beauty, the aesthetic, and I wonder, I think sometimes Gandhi also had that kind of arc because he always said, lift up. But I think when you think of Gandhi's sort of philosophically, you don't think of art so much. You don't think of
Or even science.
yeah. So I mean, his science was much more, I think, in that sense, much more hands-on.
Yeah, nutrition.
Yeah.
And I mean, he did sort of look at nutrition and things like that. But yeah, you're right. It was, yeah.
What you can do
Restricted.
to very. So yeah, so with Sarabhai, I think the scale is that he's taking. I mean, he's got Buckminster Fuller in his life. He's got, all. I'm coming across stories like, so there'll be something written on Buckminster Fuller, and there'll be some mention of the Sarabhais, or so there was this whole, as you say, international to the local arc, and the arc of beauty, design, technology, management, psychology, like everything all. And I think it's united by his love for science, because he enters it as a scientist. His approach, even in business, is to understand like he would study everything. All the data would be in his head. And then I think Bruno Rossi says that he makes all these shapes and patterns. So it doesn't matter whether he's doing. You don't have to ask why is he doing design one day, and his approach is so sort of thorough that he enters all these and unites them. So I don't know. I think maybe.
Yep. No sense of purpose.
Yeah, hi. So we bought the book and I read the back of it, and it was like um, sort of really awesome to see how much he's done. But then when we started listening to you, you made him such a lovable person. Because you
Which he was.
and that whole that inspiration from the childhood and all those things. And of course, I'm a Montessori educator, so I loved it. But I want to know, in your journey and in your research, was there like a highlight and something that really excited you, which told you which direction the book is going to go and how you're going to start?
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult. I'd never written a biography before. No, I hadn't. And as Janvi says, you don't find many examples. It's everything is a hagiography or an attack. I mean, there's no kind of neutral. And so when I had to think, did I like him? And of course I did, because that's why I sort of started thinking about writing this book. But I was prepared to not like him while I was doing the research. So had something come up, and I would not have shirked from putting it in the book. But the direction, I think it was, first of all, it excited me that he had done so many things. And yet that was a challenge, because I had to understand the history of management and then place him in the right place. So that became hard, juggling all that. So but I think, as Janvi says, when you do a biography, it's such a unique relationship. It's like no other, because that person and this person is not even alive anymore. So it's so strange. I know so much about him. I think more than probably anyone, even his family. And I'm almost thinking, and I'm always asking the question: why did he do this, and why did he do that, and how do I explain this? Kamla, for instance, how do I explain what he was? The relationship and how. Um, so I don't think I had any idea of how the book, which direction it was going, until I had everything. But this business about being lovable, this is something everyone who knew him will tell you. And it seems to have been an extraordinary quality, because it wasn't. I'll give you an example. Has his niece, who I don't think, like she told me, I didn't think my uncle was so great or anything till he died. And then all these people came for the funeral, and so someone who thinks like that told me that there was one evening she spent with she spent they have she and her mother had dinner with him or something, and she says, he just made you feel special. I cannot explain it, but the way he focused his attention, his attentiveness, his sensitivity, that I think sensitivity is a word that I haven't used, but I should, because I think that was what he was. So even if his colleagues, like there was a colleague who had a child who was not well, he'd say, "Can I post you somewhere else where you can get treatment for the child?" It was like, how did he have space in his head? So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, because I don't even know how the book took shape. I think it just.
You've kind of touched this, but the sheer number of institutions, as you said,
Yes.
right? And each of them is probably the first of its kind in the
Right.
country, right?
Yeah,
So,
many.
and we live in times where, like, building an institution is 10, 15 years of very focused work, if not more. How did he? I know you've touched upon this. How did he do it all? Like, was he good at influencing people? Lovable, you said, is one of those things.
Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think he was probably a very good. I mean, this enterprise. Entrepreneurship was in his blood, I guess. Because you're right. He comes back from Cambridge. I think he's like 27. He must be planning it for what, a couple of months or something, and then suddenly there's PRL, there's AMA. I mean, AMA comes a little later, but there is Atira. And as you say, each one should be taking him 15, 20 years, but it's all happening in that kind of year. So I mean, I think first of all, it was, where he comes from, Ahmedabad, very entrepreneurial city. People are very entrepreneurial. So maybe that idea that we have to get things done is very, very much ingrained. And they've done it. It's not like they've set up their mills and they set up their associations. So they have that experience, and they have the land. The Ahmedabad Education Society has the land. The chief minister is very much with them. So I think, and of course Nehru and Motilal Nehru were family friends of the Sarabhais. Indira Gandhi was, well known to them. I mean, so all that was in place, and but it was very quick. They got the architects, and all of it was done with thought.
Yeah.
They got Kanwinde and Rai to do some of the architecture. They got Louis Kahn to design IIM. So it's not done overnight either, but yet it seemed to happen quite magically.
I mean, if I may just add a couple of sentences to that, leadership, right? Like that would be one thing which we haven't studied well, actually, in the Indian context for the first generation of institution builders, if one were to call them that. And the other thing is also, if you're building that many things, of course, networks help, as Amrita already said, to know all these people and to get things right. Also delegation, right? Like to have the confidence to say that I am building this institution, but I'm going to get other people to contribute equally, and that doesn't threaten my leadership, right? Like that in India is such a big thing. People can't let go. I mean, in fact, I've just, I've sent it in. I have no idea when the book will be out, but it was written by an American scholar who was observing Indian science for the first 20 years. So he looks at 1947 to about 1966, evaluating institutions, people, organization, recruitment, policy, so on and so forth. And he makes one argument which really actually made me very angry when I read it for the first time, but later kind of came to terms with it. He said, Indians build organizations, not institutions. Because every time the leader's gone, the institution or the lack of an institution collapses. So it's really built on personal networks alone. And I
Right.
think that is where people like him succeeded.
I think one more thing, though, I should say, because I started with the scientific approach and his love for science. I think what he did is he had a way of working. So in business, this is what I was told he did. He joined, like his father. I think he becomes chairman or something of one of the companies. And first of all, there's this old guard who he shows full respect to. He makes them form a committee so that they still feel included. And then of course he delegates. But he has this approach with everything he does. He used to do it with the space program because he was doing space and doing atomic energy and doing so many other things. He would get himself completely acquainted with the facts on the ground. Like everything he would read, like he would read everything. And he would have, like his meetings would be on trains when he was going somewhere with his students. They would be on airplanes. He was constantly doing something. But because he knew everything, so he knew, for instance, profit loss, the statistics, everything. He would do his homework so well that it helped.
That would also explain, his untimely passing, right? Like in his
Yes,
sleep, I mean, the
yes,
amount of
yes.
stress.
Yeah.
So that also is a flip side.
Of course.
Hi. Thank you, Amrita, for a very well-informed talk, and also Janvi for a very well-moderated session. So thank you so much. My question is a little futuristic, but building on what you worked on, and I invite both of you to answer it. So there were a lot of context around Vikram Sarabhai that helped this defining moment in his life, around development, because there was the World War II, there was India's freedom movement, and all of that. And I guess probably that also helped him expand and make his vision so holistic. Now, in the era of, exactly like you said, infra and economics, where sometimes our leaders tend to take very narrow visions of catching up with the West almost, and then letting go of our innate ability to really envision something much bolder for ourselves. What do you think could contribute to a defining moment? Let's say if Vikram was around now, how do you think he'd, kind of rally everyone? Because, we're already developing or developed in some way, and we've got our space program up. So I'm just curious to know whatever is top of your mind.
No, it's a good question. I really like to have been made to think about that. I think, first of all, I do think that if he was alive, had lived longer, then we would have pushed more for a more holistic and that kind of vision. But there were some things that he had not started taking an interest in. They were part of his worldview, but I haven't mentioned them. So one was, for instance, the environment, and so for instance, he was involved in atomic energy, right? So he is thinking about what to do with the waste and all that. These are not things that he was not the kind of technologist that did not think about what about the harm or the potential. He did. Even with the site experiment, there were these sort of feedback loops where, now I'm not saying he was an angel. There were, I mean, I'm sure that many things went wrong, but so I'm thinking it would be the environment today. I think that would be, he would be able to, I think, rally people around some idea of the earth, because one of the things that always struck me very beautifully, he would talk about space. Like, he was involved in the space program. It's a technological program. It's got goals and all that, but he had a philosophical relationship with space. He said that someday we will kind of, when we understand how sort of insignificant we are, I'm not repeating the exact words, but so he had a very philosophical approach to the things he was doing. It wasn't just a doer. So yeah.
I mean, if I may add to it, his son, in fact, did
Yes, his son
continues to
set
work
up
on the environment,
so-
Kartikeya Sarabhai. What I would say is that if there was a Vikram Sarabhai around today, similar age, similar whatnot, DeepSeek would have been made here rather than in China. So, I mean, we speak about having information technology leadership. We speak about, we are an engineering nation, and that since the 80s we have developed prowess and whatnot and what. But DeepSeek didn't happen. Whereas the space program, we landed. I mean, India is the first country to land on the lunar South Pole. So it's that long that it takes a vision to materialize, right? Like, and if there was if there was leadership like that around, we would have been working on these projects now for 30, 40 years to be at the
Yeah.
frontier now.
Yeah, that's true.